it became an impossible task for me. In the past videos, you might have noticed the connection between my career choices, my passions, and Africa. This is a painful connection, and it's one that I've been working on my entire life. So, yes, being mixed affected my life in all possible ways. Growing up, I got asked all kinds of questions you might have heard in other places, of course. But these are like, where are you from? No, but where are you really from? Where are your parents from? But when did you arrive in Italy? Were you born here? No, but where were you born? Can you understand me? Or they would directly speak to me slowly, assuming that Italian was not my native language. As I grew older, people would also be a bit more shy and would not dare to ask the same questions as directly. They would rather wait for me to speak. And as soon as they realized that my Italian was indeed at a native level, they would look visibly relieved. She looks like a foreigner, but maybe she's not. In the 80s and 90s, the trend among immigrant parents was to focus on the main languages spoken in the area rather than their own. And so they preferred not to teach a second or third language to their children, believing that it would make them even more different than they were. And they were different. We were different. Not accepted in school, among peers, and we would be bullied. Nowadays, we know for a fact that this is not true, that actually this specific set of actions is one of the reasons behind major identity crises among mixed children. For some of us, our skin, the color of our eyes, the texture of our hair was enough to be discriminated and to be set aside. There is no way out from it. However, language would have been a powerful inclusive tool, because it would have included children like me in a second culture. We would fully belong to at least 2 distinct cultures, or more, depending on your parents' heritage. 2 different peoples would potentially recognize us as one of their own. The end result of my upbringing is that I identify as Italian, because I was born and raised in Trieste, Italy. I'm linguistically and culturally Italian. However, Italians don't really think I belong when I'm in Italy. The problem is that, you see, I don't belong anywhere else either. In a way, it's easier for me to live in a country where I clearly don't belong, because at least people's assumptions would be correct. And so if they spoke to me slowly, it would be a sign of care. Since moving to Finland, my skin got lighter than ever. But my features, the shape of my face, my forehead, still make people wonder. And it certainly doesn't make them at ease. When I traveled to Ethiopia for the first time in 2011, I found out that people thought I belonged. For the first time in my life, there was somewhere where people thought I belonged. But this was even more confusing to me. Because, you see, contrary to what you might think, that made me truly uncomfortable. And sometimes it was borderline dangerous because people assumed I knew the local customs. And they weren't as forgiving as they would be with foreigners. So they would talk to me in Amharic. And even though I immediately told them, I don't speak the language, please let's switch to English instead, they would not believe me. They would get offended sometimes, thinking that I was making fun of them, whereas I was genuinely puzzled and my discomfort grew exponentially. Among the ethnic groups in Ethiopia, you can really find all sorts of shades of brown, but also totally different features. And so compared to Italy, it was easier for them to believe that I would belong to at least one of these ethnic groups, rather than for Italians to believe that with these features and this skin color, I could be Italian. Interestingly, in Tanzania and in Kenya, I was always a Muzungu. And so as soon as they set eyes on me, they knew I couldn't possibly be a local, and they treated me accordingly. So in a way it felt safer to me to be traveling both in Tanzania and in Kenya. You see, I was never given the chance to embrace my African side, precisely because I was never taught the language. Some Ethiopians, even in my latest trip to Ethiopia, held me accountable for my quote-unquote ignorance, for not knowing the language. And they don't know the struggle. They just assumed that I didn't care. But believe me when I tell you that I've tried learning a language, I've tried so hard for most of my life, and I always miserably failed. Perhaps it was due to the lack of support from the African side of my family, which I barely know. When I was a kid, every time I tried to learn and start from scratch, the only tool that I was given was a piece of cardboard with an old alpha syllabary of Amharic printed on. And they expected me to learn a whole language just with an alpha syllabary. No explanations whatsoever, no grammar, no translations, no active teaching. Of course, there were no Amharic courses back then where I lived. I don't think there are any Amharic language courses nowadays in my region. There were no resources at the time. I grew up without internet, so that wasn't an option. The problem is that the longer you wait to start learning a language, the harder it gets. Because you see, the more I tried, the higher a wall would grow inside my brain, as if that's not something I'm capable of anymore. And that happened specifically with Amharic. You see, I've always heard Amharic as a background music. You know, when you go to a grocery store and you listen passively to some sort of music, and you just get used to it without paying attention to the words or to the specific sounds. So that's what Amharic is to me. It's just a melody. I recognize it. I can catch a couple of words here and there, but there's a wall after that. I cannot fight it. I cannot go beyond that anymore. Learning any language is difficult. It requires energy, time, sometimes passion. It requires care, attention. And so unless you really start from a young age and you surround yourself with that specific language, you might reach a point like me in which you really cannot do it. It's impossible. But being an adult and traveling through Ethiopia, even with a basic level of the language, you will never be considered as a speaker of the language. You will never reach a bilingual level, and there are chances you will never be fluent. In the end, you will always be marginalized, especially when you're sitting in front of an Ethiopian man who expects you to speak the language and judges you because you are not able to speak the language and you didn't care enough to learn it. Well, that doesn't help either, does it? I've always admired bilingual kids, and I've always thought that they had a superpower, even before getting into linguistics. It's as if I missed an opportunity without even being given the chance to get the opportunity in the first place. I'm being judged for not being given the possibility. But can you really blame the kid for not learning the language of the father? If the father doesn't care about teaching the language? Yes, it's a scar for me. It doesn't matter if it's visible or not. My identity is shaped around that scar. That's how I ended studying linguistics, specifically African languages and African linguistics. That's how I ended up doing a PhD in linguistics, working on Cushitic languages, which are spoken also in Ethiopia. And so this video is for all other mixed kids who grew up misunderstood, put aside, left dealing with their parents' failures and choices. I distinctly remember the moment in which I realized I was different, and it didn't come from me. It came from my peers at school, primary school. And one day I looked at my hands and realized that the color didn't match my peers. It sounds silly, but it's true that for kids, racism doesn't exist until someone shows it to them. Someone tells them you are different or they are different from you. To me, it didn't matter at first. Yes, there were some odd questions walking around with my mother, who is Italian, and she would always have to defend herself in a way and say, no, but these are my kids. And people would always make these stupid comments and ask silly questions as if that was their business, but I get it, it's curiosity. And again, there weren't many of us in Trieste at the time. So we were 4 kids who were all different. But among us, we were all the same. So it didn't matter to us. It began to matter when we grew up. And when I specifically realized that I was missing out, because there was an entire second culture that I didn't know about and I barely heard of. We had no social media, and even on television there was barely anything about Africa except for like documentaries on safaris or animals. So we couldn't even see what that side of the family was supposed to look like. So when I went to Ethiopia the first time in 2011, it was truly a discovery journey. I had no idea what to expect. I was 20 years old and I just flew all the way to Ethiopia for my first solo trip because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to experience the culture that I didn't know anything about, but I knew in a way it was supposed to be mine. It's as if it was stolen from me, and I didn't even know the value of the things I was robbed of. Most of my memories related to the African side of my family are negative or unpleasant. And so it was a risk for me to just travel there on my own and find out if that was true, if that image I had in my mind was real, if those people were just like my father, or if that was his way of being and other Ethiopians would be different. Let me tell you, I noticed some differences even now when I traveled back for the second time to Ethiopia and I traveled to a different region. I saw how different these ethnic groups can be. Last October, I went to a region which is quite far from the one my father is from, and I found it quite pleasant. The people were nice. Yes, I noticed some of the same features that I grew up seeing in my father, but you see, despite all of my efforts to understand the language, to understand the culture, to learn about them, to learn from them, I will never be one of them. This topic can be quite emotional for me because, as I told you, this affected my entire life, for better or for worse. And so, in a way, I'm looking for other mixed people who experience something similar to what I experienced and who can share with me their thoughts. I wonder if you ended up looking for a job that would, in a way, get you closer to the other culture. Growing up mixed can be a blessing sometimes. In my case, I would say it wasn't. And in a way, I'm trying to improve that and to find the silver lining and to make the most of the fact that I'm different. So now I'm curious, are you mixed? Or do you know anybody who grew up mixed as well? What's your experience? What happened to you? There you have it. I hope this personal video gives you some insights and explains the reasons behind my actions, which include the creation of this channel, among other things. This was part of my story. What's yours? Thank you for watching till the end. I hope I'll see you in the next one.